Picking tools ain't easy. I mean, there's so many choices, so many brands, so many configurations. How do you know whether to pick Metabo, Bosch or Ryobi, or so many other brands? Do you end up completely overwhelmed and paralyzed by choice? Don't worry, because today I'm going to break down exactly how to pick the right tools, or more specifically, what not to do, so that you can start blowing all of your savings on tools that you actually use, rather than just ending up with a pile of regrets. Now, I know what you're thinking, the age-old question. What brand is actually the best? What company should I pay an unreasonable amount of money to undertake basic tasks around the house? But here's the truth. Brands, they don't actually matter. I mean, kind of. Don't get stuck in the marketing hype. The assumption that the Milwaukee or DeWalt or Festool or any other company is just simply the best is kind of not the right one. And I know, there's a very comforting feeling in picking a color like in Power Rangers and just sticking with that one. But it's not always the best idea, and especially so when it comes to value for money. Now, I'll definitely agree that if you buy all of your tools from DeWalt like this table saw, or Milwaukee or Festool or any other professional brand tool, you probably will be satisfied with your choices. I mean, these brands, they have a reputation for a reason. But not a lot of us have that kind of money to spend on every single tool. So we have to be a little bit more creative. And you see, what does actually really matter is the reputation of every single individual tool rather than the brand itself. Some tools have really earned their stripes and they have a really good reputation for a reason. When you actually start looking for recommendations for individual tools, you very quickly notice a pattern. For example, when I was looking for a jigsaw, I very quickly noticed that Bosch has actually really good reputation for jigsaws. Or when I was looking for a router, I also noticed that Bosch has a really good reputation. But when I was looking for a table saw, Bosch really wasn't recommended. It actually had a lot of issues and a lot of people were warning to stay away from those. So in my case, I went with a DeWalt, which I'm very happy about. So if you want to get most out of your buck, treat every single tool independently. But talking about reputation, here's where it gets tricky. Online reviews. Like with anything, oftentimes you'll see a huge amount of positive and negative information about any single thing. And it's actually very difficult sometimes to really be able to tell what the truth is. As some positive information will be from partnerships and people having financial incentive for that tool to sell well, and some negative information is from people that actually got a manufacturing defect or have very high expectations towards that tool or simply don't really know how to use the tool that they bought. In addition, many reviews are actually from tradesmen that have been using these tools for decades and their needs are actually very different from yours. So my point is, be cautious. I mean, these are still very valuable opinions and you should listen to them, but take them with a grain of salt. However, here's a pro tip for filtering through all of those online reviews, especially when you're on a budget. Now, I would recommend to stay away from the glowing 5-star reviews. I mean, the confirmation bias of reading the many positive reviews about the tool that you want to buy is very comforting. But I would recommend to check out the 1 and the 2-star reviews, because that's where the real truth is. Now, people love to complain. I mean, we all know that. And sometimes those complaints are very unfair. But a lot of times, they're actually spot on. And if there are multiple people complaining about the exact same thing, the chances are it's gonna happen to you. I mean, if multiple people are complaining about safety, accuracy, precision, or whatever else, you're gonna have the same problems. Now, to be clear, all tools have this. I mean, all tools have some issues that are repeatedly mentioned in the reviews. The question is, how many of them are there and how critical these are to what you want to do? And as you can expect, some things are actually pretty nitpicky, but some of them are pretty fundamental to how you want to use the tool. You probably will know which one is which. Anyway, let's talk about money. I mean, we all want the best bang for our buck, right? But that bang is actually very subjective. I mean, for some it's the number of features, for some it's the stability and the build quality, for some it's precision, for some it's literally everything. So it does end up being quite subjective. Personally, if you're buying on a budget or somewhere in the mid-range, I would recommend that you focus on the build quality over the number of features. And focus on things like solid castings, durable bushings, quality materials instead of functionalities which might actually not be that useful. It is better to buy a tool that may have fewer buttons and levers and fancy things, but won't actually break after a while. And for budget tools especially, I actually think that this aspect is really important. For example, when I was buying the jigsaw, I was faced with this exact question. I could have picked a Ryobi with a flashlight and some of the other things which this doesn't have. But I didn't, because the build quality just isn't the same and the Ryobi isn't going to last as long. And I say this because I actually read a lot of reviews comparing these two jigsaws and that was pretty much the outcome in every single one of them. I mean, there's usually a reason why DeWalt or Milwaukee or Festool will always give you far less functionalities for the same price than Ryobi or Skill or many other companies. But in those examples, pretty much every single time the tool with less functionalities will actually outlast by far the tool with more functionalities, especially if you're talking about budget tools. Of course, I'm not saying that Ryobi or Skill or any other company is bad. At least I think I'm not. But what I'm saying is, if you want to really get the best bang out of your buck and you want these tools to last a long time, that's what I do. Now, let's move into the great debate. Wired versus cordless. Cordless tools are really convenient. I mean, you can just pick up the tool, grab the battery, and you're ready to go. It's efficient, it's quick, you don't have to think about extension cords, it's wonderful. But sadly, they have a big disadvantage, especially if you're talking about bang for your buck. In most cases, they just ain't worth it. I mean, if you have a specific budget and you're spending an exact same amount of money on both of these tools, the cordless one will always be worse. But let me expand. If you're spending $150 on a tool, and I know this tool isn't worth that much, but if you're spending that amount of money and the battery costs half of that, really, you're just getting a tool for $75. Whereas with the corded tool, all of that money goes into the actual tool, meaning better castings, better gears, better bushes, pretty much better everything. You're also getting a lot more power from the socket than from a battery, but that's kind of beside the point. The point is, if you're on a budget, it's always incomparably better to buy a wired tool than a cordless one. And no one will convince me otherwise. There are of course exceptions to that rule, like with a hand drill. I do have a wired one, but that's to make holes in concrete, which this really struggles with. So for beginners and DIYers, pretty much in most cases, wired will always be better than cordless one. Now, this may seem obvious, and that's because it kind of is. Buy the tools you actually need. I mean, it's very easy to get carried away and just buy every single tool in sight. We all love shiny new things, the joy of opening a new tool and just learning all about it. It's wonderful. But stop. Only invest in tools that you actually need. Have a really good think about whether you actually need that tool or you just want it. Because those two things are not the same. Think about whether you will actually use that tool or whether it's going to go and sit in the shelf of shame, where a lot of tools actually end up with and they just sit there for a very long time. There are, of course, and I accept this, tools that are very rarely used but really useful. In my case, it is actually the corded hand drill, which I use very rarely, but it is so useful when I need to. Or the multi-tool. I don't use these things often, but if I need to make a hole in concrete like this wall, it is incredibly useful and I don't really have any alternative. So my advice here is buy the tools you need, not just the ones you want. Now, there are times where you need a specific tool, and in your head you think that you will use it often enough to justify buying it, or you just simply need it for a weekend to get a job done. And if you have enough money to be buying tools left and right, go for it, why not? But for hobbyists or DIYers, there is another way. And the secret is, and it is quite shocking, that you can actually borrow tools. It's shocking, I know. But you will actually be surprised what your friends and your family have on the shelf of shame. The amount of tools that are just sitting there not being used, that you could borrow if you need to. And let's be honest, the cost of a pack of beer and a new blade is a lot cheaper than buying a new tool. So have a think about that alternative. So there you have it. 7 tips to help you pick the right tools and to avoid some of the common mistakes. Now I hope that you found this video useful. If you did, please let me know in the comments below. If you want to add anything or just think all of these are bollocks, please also do so. And on that note, goodbye.